to my channel, or welcome if you're new. And for today's video, I just have a DIY notebook cover to share with you guys. I wanted to show you guys how to turn boring old composition notebooks into something better. So let's get on to the video. So this first one is going to be super simple, and for all of these I'm using the composition notebooks because they're easier to customize. So for this first one, all I needed was a glue stick, an X-Acto knife, or you can use scissors, a ruler, and 2 sheets of decorative paper, one for the front and one for the back. First, I measured the height and the width starting on the black binding because personally I wanted to keep it, but you can always cover it with washi tape if you don't like the black binding. Then I trimmed my papers, leaving about 1/4 of an inch around each side just in case my cuts or measures were off. Then I glued them down to the cover and the back of the notebook. And after that, I trimmed off the excess with scissors, or you can use an X-Acto knife. Next is the fun part where you can decide to decorate it a bit more by adding pictures or stickers, or just leave it as is. Just do keep in mind on the thickness, and I will show you a way to protect the cover of your notebooks later on in the video. But to mine, I just decided to add a simple sticker. And voila, there is my finished notebook. For this next notebook, I am using 2 white sheets, one for the front and one for the back, and I cut these ones 1/4 of an inch bigger on each side as well, and I went ahead and glued them down and trimmed off the excess. So for this notebook, I wanted to create a sort of glowing effect, so I am using 1-inch masking tape as well as a really thin washi tape. So for the masking tape, I taped it to my blanket first so it's not as sticky when it comes contact to my paper. And I just placed it how I liked it, and doing the same thing for the thin tape and repeating that process until I liked the design. So to create the effect that I wanted, I'm going to be using chalk pastels. You do have to be careful when using chalk pastels because they do smudge very easily and you could easily get fingerprints all over your cover. I pressed the desired color onto the tape and not directly to the paper, and used a paper towel to smudge the paper with the color, and with the lighter colors I did do it twice, but you can do it till you get your desired pigment. Once I put a color for each tape, I removed it to reveal that bright white lines, creating that sort of glowy effect. for this next notebook, I wanted a watercolor cover. Again, like the last notebook, I covered it with white sheets of paper and trimmed off the excess. First, I tape the black edges as well as the paper edges so the water doesn't hit the inside edges and ruins the inside papers. My color scheme was cool tones, and I just splattered onto the cover and then dabbed away the excess water that was on the paper, then re-splattered till I got my desired cover. Now I'm going to show you how to protect your covers from tearing off or from people from writing on them or them just falling off from the use. So the material I'm using to cover these is the transparent adhesive covering, which I purchased at the Dollar Tree, and I was able to cover 4 composition notebooks with 1 roll. I cut a piece to cover both front and back, leaving about 3/4 of an inch on each side. Then I removed half of the covering and started by covering the back of the notebook first. And if you end up getting too many bubbles, it's super easy to remove if you need to. Or if you don't mind as much, it is also easy to smooth down with your fingers. I then cut a slit at the bottom before the binding, and then 2 slits for the corners, and folded them over to secure the plastic cover. And then repeated all the steps to the front of the notebook. And if you accidentally didn't leave enough room for an edge, I simply used a piece of leftover covering and used 2 squares, but it does depend on the coverage of the original piece, and placed it overlapping the original about 1/4 of an inch, and you can barely tell the difference. Lastly is trimming the top and the bottom leftovers from the bindings. as well as pointy edges if it bothers you, and then you're done. And I did the same thing to all of my notebooks. For this one, I customized it more by putting pictures. It does leave bubbles around the edges because of the thickness. If bubbles bother you, try sticking with thin printed papers or thin stickers. So for this next notebook that I am creating is a Mickey Mouse notebook, and I am using craft foam, but you could also just use sheets of paper. You're going to need liquid glue or glue stick if you're using paper, an X-Acto knife or scissors. So for the craft foam, you don't have to purchase a pack that I did. You could also just purchase these individually in your local craft store. And I'm just using it in the colors red, white, and black. So first I arranged my foam, and then I trimmed it 2/3 black and 1/3 red, and then trimmed off the excess. Next I cut a piece of paper and cut it into an oval shaped, and then traced 2 of them onto the white foam, and then cut them with scissors, or you can also cut them with an X-Acto knife. Then I glued down the black and the red foam, and I placed them, leaving them to dry for about 10 minutes. It is optional to glue the oval pieces on top of the red, but personally I wanted it flat and just a single layer because it's less of a chance of it falling off. So what I did is just place them over the desired spot that I wanted them in. So with an X-Acto knife, I traced around the white. Notice I didn't trace with a pencil because pencil markings on foam leaves harsh indents that I didn't want on the foam. Once fully cut, I removed it and placed more glue, and then I placed the white to take its place and repeated for the other side. Then just trimming off the excess and you're done. As for the Minnie Mouse notebook, it's the same ratio for the red and black, but instead of the oval shapes on the white foam, you're tracing white circles. The amount depends on your desired size. I used about 10 and about 2-inch circles, and then I traced and cut with an X-Acto knife for this one as well. Next, I cut a bow from paper, and then I traced and cut from the red foam. Then I used a hole punch from my ruler to cut out the spots, but I recommend to use a single hand hole puncher since the ruler was harder to get to certain spots, but I tried to make them work. I also punched out the white dots to fit in perfectly. Once the bow was finished, I cut the black part to create the single layer and glued it in place, and that is it. Today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you can stay notified every single time I post a new video. Also, if you end up recreating any of these notebooks or just creating your own notebook, make sure to tag me on Instagram so I can see your creations. And I'll see you guys next time.